My name is Dan, and I was once a promising PhD student in psychology, on the brink of a breakthrough in my field. But my life took a turn into the shadows when I was offered an opportunity that seemed too good to refuse. I found myself on an isolated island, part of a top-secret project that delved into the human mind's darkest corners. The experiments I witnessed were reminiscent of the rumored MK Ultra projects, pushing the boundaries of ethics and humanity. The subjects weren't just patients, they were pawns in a larger game. If you're reading my account, it means something has happened to me. But know this, the horrors I've described are real, and they're happening right under our noses. As I said, it all started when I was on the cusp of completing my PhD in psychology. The long nights, the endless research papers, the countless hours of patient evaluations, all of it was about to pay off. Or so I thought. One chilly morning, as I was sipping my coffee and skimming through emails, one particular message caught my eye. The subject read, "An opportunity of a lifetime." I clicked it, half expecting it to be spam. But what I read left me both intrigued and unsettled. The email was from a government contractor, a name I'd never heard of, and my subsequent attempts to Google them yielded no results. They said that they'd been following my academic career and were impressed by my research. They were offering me a position that, according to them, would be perfectly suited to my skills. The details were vague, but the salary mentioned was anything but. It was an amount that would take care of my student loans and then some. But here's where it got strange. The position required immediate relocation to an offshore island. The exact location was undisclosed, with the promise that all details would be provided upon acceptance. I was torn. Every rational bone in my body screamed that this was suspicious. But the allure of financial security, the chance to work on something potentially groundbreaking, and, I admit, a dose of youthful recklessness, made me accept. A week later, I found myself on a chartered plane, heading to an unknown destination. As the land disappeared behind me, replaced by the vast expanse of the ocean, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was heading into the unknown, in more ways than one. The plane touched down on a surprisingly well-maintained airstrip, considering the remote nature of the island. As I disembarked, the first thing that struck me was the overwhelming presence of the U.S. Army. Soldiers patrolled the area, their faces stern and their weapons always at the ready. It was clear this wasn't just a research facility, it was a high-security installation. I was escorted to the main building, a modern structure that contrasted sharply with the wild, untamed nature of the island. Inside, the atmosphere was clinical, with white walls, fluorescent lights, and a silence that was only occasionally broken by distant, muffled sounds. My role, as it was explained to me, was straightforward. I was to analyze data, looking for patterns, anomalies, or any signs of progress. The data was the result of experiments being conducted on the patients, or as they were referred to in the facility, subjects. Although I wasn't supposed to have direct contact with these subjects, the nature of my work meant I was privy to the details of the experiments. One evening, as I was analyzing some data, a senior researcher named Dr. Mitchell stopped by my station. "You're probably wondering about the nature of these experiments," he began, glancing at the charts on my screen. I nodded, trying to maintain a neutral expression. "It's quite intense," I remarked. Dr. Mitchell sighed. "Yes, it is. We're dealing with extreme cases here. For instance, we use sensory manipulation. Subjects are exposed to long periods in pitch-black, soundproof rooms. Then suddenly, they're hit with blinding lights and deafening sounds. It's about resetting their sensory perceptions." I swallowed hard, trying to process this. "And the drugs?" I asked. "We're trialing a mix of chemicals," he continued, "aimed at altering brain chemistry. The idea is to suppress violent tendencies and promote a more docile state." "And the repetitive imagery and sounds?" I pressed on. "Cognitive reconditioning," he explained. "We're trying to overwrite certain memories or beliefs. And then there's the ECT. I know it's a recognized treatment, but we're pushing its limits here." I nodded, my unease growing. "All this to cure extreme mental illnesses?" Dr. Mitchell looked at me, his eyes cold and calculating. "That's the goal," he replied, leaving me with more questions than answers. One evening, as I was leaving my workstation, I overheard a whispered conversation between two technicians. "It's working," one said. "But at what cost?" the other replied. Their words sent a chill down my spine, and I knew that this place held secrets far beyond what I was being told. Days turned into weeks, and the initial awe of the facility began to wear off, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The island, with its constant military presence and the facility's strict protocols, felt more like a prison than a research institution. One day, as I was heading to the cafeteria for a quick lunch, I took a wrong turn and found myself in a dimly lit corridor. The muffled sounds of distress echoed through the walls. Curiosity got the better of me, and I followed the sounds until I reached a heavy metal door with a small window. Peeking through, I saw a sight that would haunt my dreams for years to come. A man strapped to a chair, electrodes attached to his head, his eyes wide with terror. A technician stood beside him adjusting some equipment, while a screen displayed erratic brainwave patterns. I quickly retreated, my heart racing. I had seen enough, but as I turned to leave, I bumped into someone. It was Clara, a nurse I'd seen around but never spoken to. She looked as shocked as I felt. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered, her eyes darting around nervously. "I got lost," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "What are they doing to him?" She hesitated, then leaned in closer. "It's part of the therapy. They say it's to help them, but I've seen the aftermath. It's not treatment, it's torture." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Why don't you report it?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and sadness. "And end up like them? No one speaks out here, Dan. It's too dangerous." We parted ways, but her words stayed with me. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of what I had witnessed pressed down on me. The facility's mission, the experiments, the so-called therapy. It all began to form a sinister picture. I knew I had to tread carefully. Asking too many questions could put me in danger, but the thought of staying silent, of being complicit in whatever was happening on this island, was unbearable. I had to find a way to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The days that followed were a blur of tension and paranoia. Every conversation I had, every corridor I walked down, I felt eyes on me. But amidst the fear, an unexpected alliance formed. Clara and I began to meet in secret, sharing our observations and concerns about the facility. One evening, in a secluded corner of the island, she handed me a small notebook. "I've been documenting everything," she whispered. "The names of the subjects, the experiments they undergo, their reactions, everything." I flipped through the pages, my heart sinking with every entry. Detailed accounts of pain, distress, and in some cases, complete mental breakdowns. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked, looking up at her. "Because you're new here," she replied. "They don't watch you as closely as they watch me. If something happens to me, I want someone to know the truth." Our clandestine meetings became more frequent. We pooled our knowledge, trying to piece together the larger agenda behind the experiments. It became clear that the facility's goal wasn't just to cure mental illnesses. There was something far more sinister at play. One day, Clara managed to smuggle out a recording. It was a session between a subject and one of the lead researchers. The subject's voice was desperate. "Why are you doing this to me? I've done nothing wrong." The researcher's reply was cold and detached. "You're here because you're a whistleblower. You revealed top-secret data. But don't worry, by the time we're done with you, you won't even remember your name." A chilling cackle followed, and then the sound of electroshock therapy being administered echoed through the recording. The reality hit me like a ton of bricks. These weren't just mentally ill patients. They were individuals who had crossed paths with the government, like the whistleblower in the recording. As the days went by, our resolve strengthened. We knew we had to expose the facility's operations to the world. But the question remained, how? The island was heavily guarded, communication with the outside world was restricted, and we were constantly monitored. But we were determined. Every system has its weaknesses, and we were set on finding ours. The next morning, as I was engrossed in my work, a stern knock interrupted my thoughts. 2 guards stood at the entrance of my office, their expressions unreadable. "The directors want to see you," one of them said curtly. I was led to a part of the facility I had never been to before. The hallway was more opulent, the walls adorned with expensive-looking art. a stark contrast to the sterile environment I was used to. They ushered me into a spacious room with a large wooden table at its center. 3 individuals, whom I recognized as the top bosses of the facility, sat on one side. Their faces were stern, their eyes cold. "Sit," one of them commanded, pointing to the chair opposite them. Before I could utter a word, the lights dimmed, and a projector screen came to life. The video that played was one of the most disturbing things I had ever witnessed. It was Clara, strapped to a chair in one of the cells. The familiar hum of the electroshock machine filled the room, and her agonized screams pierced the air as she begged for mercy. The video ended as abruptly as it began, plunging the room into a heavy silence. The lights came back on and the 3 bosses fixed their gaze on me. "This is what happens to those who don't stay in their lane, Dan," the one in the middle said, his voice dripping with menace. Clara was warned repeatedly. She chose not to listen. The one on the left leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Now we're warning you, stay in your lane. Curiosity killed the cat." The third, without breaking eye contact, added, "If we see any more of this behavior from you, well, I'm sure you get the idea." I was dismissed without another word. As I walked back to my office, the weight of their threat pressing down on me, I realized that the facility was even more dangerous than I had imagined. Back at my workstation, I tried to immerse myself in the data, hoping the numbers and graphs would distract me from the haunting images of Clara and the chilling warning from the directors. But it was futile. Every scream I heard, every muffled cry, it all felt personal now. The lines between my professional duties and my moral compass were blurring. Days turned into restless nights. My work suffered. I'd stare at the screen, lost in thought, feeling an overwhelming empathy for the patients who were more like hostages in this hellish facility. The desire to help Clara, to do something, gnawed at me. But what could I do? I was one man, pitted against an army, in a place where every move was watched. Then, one evening, as I was rummaging through my belongings, I stumbled upon Clara's journal. She had handed it to me during our last secret meeting, and in the chaos that followed, I had forgotten about it. With a growing sense of urgency, I began to read. The journal was a goldmine. Clara had meticulously documented the identities of several patients. Cross-referencing with my own research, I was able to match them with real-world personas. A decorated army general with top-secret clearance, a journalist who had been too vocal about government conspiracies, and shockingly, one of the director's ex-wives, seemingly imprisoned out of sheer vindictiveness. Realizing the gravity of the information I held, I knew I had to act. Using a private laptop I had smuggled into the facility, I began to compile everything. Every piece of data, every revelation from Clara's journal, and my own observations. I set up a dead man switch. Several automatic posts to social media with incriminating evidence that would expose everything. If I didn't input a secure password to abort the send every 30 days, the files would automatically post. It was a risky move, but it was my insurance. If anything happened to me, if I disappeared like so many before me, the truth wouldn't be buried with me. The world would know. The facility's layout was a maze, designed to confuse and disorient. But over time, I had managed to map out certain areas in my mind. Using this knowledge, I crafted a plan to bypass the security protocols and reach the prisoners area where Clara was held. Late one night, when the facility was at its quietest, I made my move. Slipping through service corridors and using maintenance hatches, I finally reached the high-security zone. The dim lights cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the muffled cries of the prisoners echoed hauntingly. I found Clara's cell. She was huddled in a corner, her once sharp eyes now distant, babbling incoherently to herself. Taking a deep breath, I whispered, "Clara, it's me, Dan. I'm here." Her head snapped up, her eyes widening in shock. "Dan, what are you doing here? It's not safe." "I had to see you," I replied, my voice choked with emotion. "I'm going to help you, Clara. We'll get out of here." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, Dan. There's no escape from this place. The only way you can help me is by leaving and telling the world what's happening here." I felt a pang of despair, but nodded in agreement. "Okay, Clara. I promise. I'll make sure everyone knows." As I prepared to leave, the distant sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. I began to panic. I turned to make a hasty retreat, but just as I was about to round the corner, I looked back. There, at the end of the hallway, stood the head director. Our eyes met, and in that brief moment, a chilling understanding passed between us. The chilling encounter with the director sent a wave of terror through me. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. I rushed back to my room, my heart pounding loudly in my ears. The weight of his gaze, the silent threat behind his eyes, it was all too clear. They were on to me. I don't know how much time I have. The director saw me. Their surveillance is everywhere, and I fear they're closing in. The things I've witnessed here, the atrocities, the experiments, it's all real. People are suffering, and yet I was helpless to do anything. That's when I heard a knocking at the door. The pounding grew louder, more insistent. My heart raced and a cold sweat formed on my brow. I knew they were here for me. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. 2 guards stood there, their expressions cold and unreadable. "Come with us," one of them ordered. They escorted me through the winding corridors of the facility, each turn taking me deeper into its heart. Finally, we arrived at a door different from the others. It was more inviting, less prison-like. The guard opened it and I was ushered inside. The room was well lit, with soft pastel colors on the walls and plush furniture. It looked more like a child's playroom than a cell in a high-security facility, and there in the middle of the room sat Clara. But this wasn't the Clara I knew. Her once sharp, intelligent eyes were now vacant, staring off into the distance. She was engrossed in playing with some toys, her fingers moving mechanically, her expression one of childlike wonder. "Clara," I whispered, my voice trembling, "are you okay?" She looked up, her gaze unfocused. "Who's Clara?" "My name is Steve," she replied, her voice devoid of any emotion or recognition. The realization hit me hard. They had done it. They had completely wiped her memory, reshaping her into someone else. Something else. The vibrant, brave woman I had come to know was gone, replaced by this empty shell. The guards watched me closely, their faces betraying a hint of satisfaction. Without a word, they motioned for me to leave. As I walked out, the weight of what I had witnessed pressed down on me. The facility's power to erase and reshape a person's very identity was terrifyingly real, and I couldn't help but wonder if I would be next. After witnessing Clara's haunting transformation, the guards swiftly ushered me into another room. The cold, sterile atmosphere was palpable, and at the center sat the 3 directors, their faces shadowed by the dim overhead lights. Papers were strewn across the table, and their eyes, filled with malice, bore into me. "Sit," the head director commanded, pointing to the empty chair opposite them. I hesitated for a moment, then complied. The room was thick with tension, the silence only broken by the occasional shuffle of papers. "Sign these," the director said, sliding a stack of documents toward me. I glanced at the top page, trying to make sense of the legal jargon. "What are these?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Non-disclosure agreements," he replied coldly. "Violate them and you'll be charged with treason. Do you understand the gravity of your situation, Dan?" I swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on me. "And if I refuse to sign?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The director simply smirked, raising an eyebrow in a gesture that spoke volumes. The message was clear. Refusal would result in a fate far worse than any legal repercussions. I would become just like Clara, my identity erased, my very essence wiped clean. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the other directors exchanging satisfied glances. They had me cornered, and they knew it. "Out of respect for your professional background, we've decided to let you leave this facility intact," the director continued. "But let me be clear, if we ever have to address this issue again, the consequences will be severe." I looked down at the papers, my mind racing. The thought of becoming another one of their experiments, of losing myself entirely, was too much to bear. With a heavy heart, I picked up the pen and signed the documents, sealing my fate and ensuring their secrets remained hidden. The room's atmosphere grew even colder as a nurse entered, flanked by 2 burly orderlies. Their intentions were clear as they advanced towards me, the nurse holding a syringe filled with a dark liquid. Panic surged through me and I tried to break free, but the orderly's grip was ironclad. One of the guards menacingly raised the butt of his weapon, ready to strike, and I knew resistance was futile. The nurse swiftly injected the substance into my shoulder, and a chilling numbness spread through my body. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the director's cold, penetrating glare. When I regained consciousness, I found myself on a plane, the vast expanse of the ocean visible through the window. The hum of the engines and the gentle rocking of the aircraft were the only indications of my surroundings. Time seemed to blur, but after what felt like hours, the plane touched down on a U.S. Army base. From there, I was unceremoniously dropped off at a local airport, a free man once again, but forever scarred by the horrors I had witnessed, haunted by the memories and the ever-present fear of being recaptured. The only thing that gave me peace of mind was my dead man's switch. To avoid immediate censorship, I framed it as a work of fiction, hoping that the truth would still shine through the guise of a tale. If you're reading my story, it means I am no longer free or alive. My hope is that this information reaches someone with the power and courage to intervene. The atrocities happening at that lab are beyond comprehension, a dark stain on humanity's conscience. As you read this, I can only pray that I am not back in that nightmarish facility and that my sacrifice was not in vain. Thank you for listening to tonight's story. If you enjoyed this presentation, please consider dropping a like or subscribing to our channel. It would really mean a lot to us. Stay safe and good night.